many people can see. This is an example of, this piece is from the mid-'80s. There was a series I made that were called blown plate glass vases. So one of the ideas, and I was talking to Gabe this morning, is to make some of these, but in a fresh, new, 2017 approach. This here is, it's just a little blown element that has trunk paint on it. And back when I made those, people would say, "What is that?" And I would say, "It's trunk paint," because it looks sort of like alabaster or granite or something like that. So I was talking to Gabe. I went to Olympic yesterday and bought some chips and some powder and stuff, and hopefully we'll be able to make some of those elements. And I also, we talked about just doing some clear stuff to see if we get, sort of attuned in what we're doing and everything. And the other thing is, I might want to put some chips on the outside, and so that it has some texture and all that. So hopefully, I guess we're.
So one of the things that I've seen in your work is that you like to explore light and color, and you talk about creating forms that are giving the impression of a vessel, but aren't actually vessels. Do you plan to work in that way while you're here?
Well, I didn't bring any adhesive
no, not with your typical format and your style, but exploring the same ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I also have, I have this series, I think there's some in the catalog, they're called vertical vases. And I had this idea, what I kind of like to do is make a bunch of rondelles, but different size rondelles, and have a flat in the center of it that I can glue to. And maybe, I saw, when I went up to the museum the other day, I saw Albert's castings. He has like these little bars that he made, and I assume there's probably a metal mold around where I could make that. And so then when I go back to the studio, I would flatten those and glue them to the rondelles, and they would be like vertical vases. So, and like that page right there, if you want to, Sarah, if you want to show, that's a plate glass vertical vase, and the other piece there is what I called a perfume bottle. I had a commission for this lady where I made this little perfume bottle that's vertical. So I was thinking, that whole thing that I do with the helix, part of it is the integrity of the structure of the object, because it strengthens it, because it's sort of helixes and it gives it strength all the way around. And the other thing is it's sort of like that one there too, the one that's with the red there on the right. That's the kind of idea where we could make some thick discs and, or blow. The other thing is what I used to do back in the day was I blew bubbles and then flattened them out. And I never really shaped them, but I assume that with our skills here that we probably could make angles for them, like on the outside edge, so that they're, because one of the things in the drawings, I'll show you just a drawing too, that I do a lot of drafted drawings. Learning how to use SketchUp, but I used to do all pencil drawings, and then what I do with the drawings is I take the drawing, and I know that if I need a 6-inch piece of glass, I cut a 6-inch piece of glass, but I'm able to calculate, from the outside, and in the brown paper there's a bunch of like paper doll models of vases, which, we can also caliper, and, I know that Walter's really good about, floor drawings, and like, 95 I taught at Pilchuck, and I don't know how many people know Bob Carlson. He was teaching a class with Petr Novotny, and he came to me and he said, "I'd really like you to have Petr make something that you can tell him to make." And so, being the avid fisherman that I am, I said to Petr, "Can you make this?" And I showed him a picture of a bonito, which is a kind of baby tuna. They're little mackerel tunas, and he made it, and I think I have an image of it, and it was, the guy is amazing, he was like incredible glass worker. So, and if we, and then jumping around a little bit, some of the other things, when I was a blower, I would make pieces like this. I guess you know, if we really get desperate, we'll have to make a cowboy boot or two, you know, but that'll only be if we're desperate. Let's see if I can. No, I think I have a. Whoops! Why don't that go? So I'm not. One thing I'm not is a computer person. There's, you know, these are more of the blown plate glass vases. You know, and I'd like to see if one, we can increase the scale, and two, increase the complexity and also the technique of them. Let's see here. I mean, does anybody have any questions about what I'm thinking about? There's another one. Why didn't this one go?
Can you show us the drawing?
Yeah. Oh, is that what it is?
I think you can use 2 fingers. You can scroll down.
Okay.
Do you want to show us the drawing?
Yeah, sure. Well, we'll start backwards and work forwards. Here's an example of a bonito. That's actually a fish that I caught, and then, you know how the Japanese do these fish tracing. So, you know, this is literally, you know, there's probably, I think I picked the ones that didn't have blood on them so that it wouldn't scare anybody. Here's a plate glass vase. So this piece is, here's another like concept. Like I try to, you know, challenge myself, think about stuff, and also, you know, when you're working, sometimes you'll come up with some concept and you go, wow, I never thought of it and looked at it that way, and so I try that. So this is actually 3 pieces. This is actually more than 3 pieces, because I also make what I call quasis, which are the outside. Quasi, the definition is almost. So this is just a 2-dimensional drawing, but if you looked at this, you know, in SketchUp or something where you could see it in 3D, it's basically a giant block of sheets of 1/4-inch plate glass. And each one of these has a size on it. So like the very bottom set of 3 circles is 6 3/4 inches square. And then I cut a circle out of it, and I know with plate cutting you have to have like about 1 inch or 1/2 inch of space around the outside. So, you know, these can only go so big before I can't cut them, and then I go to the next size. So they step on the outside. On the inside, there's a line here of the outer shape of that vase. Like that one on the cover of the catalog is vertical, you know, so it's the same thing, you've just turned it at 90 degrees. This inner shape is the bars, and so I make up little templates for the bars as well. So they're little pieces of 1/2-inch glass that they make that helix structure in the center. Now the thing about the concept that I came up with was I used to make them individually. I do an individual drawing, I draw a circle, strip, and then one day I said, well, I mean, they're 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch. Why don't I just make a giant one that's 3 of them, you know, and they're like brothers and sisters. And so I started making them as sets of 3. So I was making them in additions. There would be 3 of this shape, 3 of that shape, or whatever. And then, you know, periodically you get to this point where you go, hey, this is a lot of work. Is there a way I can get around this, you know? And I came up with the concept of solid vase forms. And so I started making these pieces that were completely solid. There wasn't a whole lot of polishing done. They were just circles cut and glued together, but they followed that same contour. And then I started to break those apart, and that's where that whole concept of my idea of, you know, I sort of deconstruct the vessel. So I go and I look at something that's a tradition. I mean, the reason I use the vessel is it's everywhere. You know, it's like, you know, put flowers in it, you put, you know, they used to, I mean, that was the whole genus in the beginning of the glass movement, was that they used to make stuff in ceramics, you know, they held olive oil and stuff like that, and then as they were able to, you know, increase their abilities to manufacture glass, and then they invented blowing and everything, they started making bottles to hold glass. So, you know, it's one of the universal things, and it's, you know, I mean, there are glasses, there's the glasses you look through, there's glasses for windows, there's glass for tabletops, but the most, you know, obviously universal symbol of glass is a vessel. And it also, you know, it has, you know, if you want to get into that artsy talk, you know, it has connotations and stuff like that about, you know, whatever you want to interpret it. So, so that's how the process is done. Now, you know, at times I've thought of making pieces that are stripped down that are not as complicated. So hopefully we can make a few shapes like this. And I was talking to Gabe earlier about flattening sides. You know, it might be that we get carried away and we start making these and we make them that they're like this wide and that tall and they look just like that, and then I'll just, you know, stack them together in unison. You know, one of the things that I want to do is, you all have jobs here as employees of a museum. My job is to be an artist and to make my stuff, and I would be lying if I didn't tell you that it's brutal right now. It's the worst it's ever been. It's like the scene is just dead, you know. There's no sales, and people are struggling, you know, to keep, you know, what, you know, I mean, look at all the universities that are pumping out all these people, and, you know, like where we are here, you know, this used to be Mecca, you know, everybody could go get a job in Dale's studio and know that they could get, you know, paid and work with glass, and it isn't like that anymore, you know. And I'm trying to think of ways to shake up my personal, you know, everybody has to react to that in their own personal way, you know. And my way is that I got to think of something different to make, you know, because the other thing is in the latter parts of my career, like I look at my show in Sandwich as sort of a marker of a history of my work for the last 40 years now. I can walk, if I wanted to, I'd just walk away, but I can't walk away because I don't have a retirement or anything, so I got to figure out something that I can make, plus the fact that I like working. I enjoy being in my studio every day. I like working. This, I'm going in here, I'm totally honest, I'm going in here, you know, with, you know, just, we're going to wing it in a certain way, but we're also going to put all of our energy into trying to make something happen by the end of the week. You know, either you guys will say, geez, I hope he never comes back again, or they'll wish that I, you know, hopefully I'll get to come back and, you know, we'll continue on. I know, like I went to school with David Hutchhausen, he was here, and then he came back and rented some time. And, you know, the other thing is, I'm an ambassador for glass, but I'm also a glass hole, and I know a bunch of other glass holes. There's a ton of them around, and I know a lot of people in the glass movement, you know. And the one thing is about glass, it's a material that everybody can believe in, and everybody's, you know, together on it, you know. I mean, especially like having this museum, you know, and whole, you know, Chihuly's vision and everything, to have, you know, something to promote it is fantastic. So, so those are a couple of drawings that just show, you know, I mean, I brought more drawings, and they're basically a lot of the same different things. There's a few variations in terms of, you know, I just threw a bunch of stuff together to like this one here has, you know, it's segmented into sections. This is like a solid vase form, and then it has, you know, the angles, so we can figure out, you know, with a ruler we can measure this, figure out the width and the diameter, and start making them like that. And, you know, that idea of, you know, making some plugs or plates, or like we can, you know, I mean, one of the other things, I don't know how many people know the history of plate glass, which is another thing that I, you know, sort of pride myself on, but the way that plate glass was made has, you know, evolved over the history of glass. You know, originally they made rondelles, you know, windows were round, and then they learned that they could cut the glass, and then they cut squares out of the rondelles, and then that's when people had square windows. And then they discovered that they could cast it or roll it like Spectrum or Bullseye does, and like that. And then I think it was in the early 1900s, Sir Edmund Pilkington, who was an English scientist, developed the float glass process. And that sort of revolutionized the manufacturing of plate glass. And the way that they do it is they have these giant furnaces. And I have some slides, not of the furnaces, but the line. They basically, it's like making a pancake. They have a tin oxide. It's heated in a furnace, and they cast the glass like it's a pancake, and then they pull it out. They draw it out, and it goes down a conveyor belt. And when I was at Gas in Toledo in 2012, we got to go to Rossford, which was an old LOF plant that made vitrolite, which everybody familiar with vitrolite, which is the colored plate glass, and they've converted it. It's a Pilkington plant for the auto industry, and it used to have 1,500 employees in it. Now there's 150 people, and there's nobody on the floor. Just like you look around, and it's like, where is everybody? And they're all in offices like this with computer terminals watching the furnace and everything. And then there was this wall, and it had all of these iron pipes on it. And I'm like, what are those for? And I became friends with the guy, the tour guide. I started talking to him, and he says, well, if something happens to the line, all hell breaks loose, and everybody's going to be coming out of those offices and grabbing one of those pipes and smashing the glass, because what happens is, if they have a backup on the conveyor belt, they got to get it, you know, rectified right away, because the machine, you know, the glass is coming out of the furnace constantly. So, and it was interesting, but there isn't a human being that touches the glass until the forklift driver picks it up off of the floor on a crate. That there's like, it comes to the end of the line, a robot comes out and cuts it, another robot comes over with a suction cup, picks it up and puts it in a crate, and then the next thing you know, it goes either to Ford or GM or one of the companies to be a windshield, you know, because they cut them, they make the shape that they need for the do it, except that I brought a bunch of different shapes. So, you know, hopefully what we'll do is we'll put a shape like this up on you know, on a board or something, and we'll, you know, go from there. And there's some, I even brought some paper folded just so that if I decide to make a new shape, we can, you know, and we'll see, you know, if, I mean, I've seen what everybody in the blow shop can do in terms of, you know, like Rich's stuff, so we'll see, you know, where we can go from there. So, are there any questions? Or is there...
What do you start with?
I think we're going to do some clear, just some clear vases, like something
Really think that
like this. Yeah, we wanted to try doing something. The other thing I wanted to do, until we figure out the color thing, was do some thick stuff. And I also would like to, I had talked to Ben earlier about getting some like chips and seeing if we can roll into chips and leave them on the surface. You know, I'd like to see some texture, and maybe, I don't know, you know, like I say, I haven't blown glass for 25, 30 years, and seriously, but, you know, like, I used to love playing around with all kinds of different stuff, you know, rolling in tapioca, and, you know, I don't know, I saw in David's studio, I saw those giant cylinders that he made with the iron filings on them and the Van see vessels. I mean, who let him come in